studies suggest that when our bodies experience low oxygen conditions, like living in the Mile High City, it can be beneficial for people with diabetes. So how is this even possible? We have 9 News health and medical expert Dr. Kohli here to explain the science. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
This is unbelievable. So we live in altitude here in the Mile High City. What are some of the changes that happen in our body due to the altitude?
So it's interesting. Katie will tell you that because we live at altitude, there's lower barometric pressure. There's less oxygen. The partial pressure of oxygen is less. So our bodies see less oxygen. Now they're designed to see the normal amount of oxygen. So we start having a lot of changes. So the first change is our respiratory rate actually increases. We hyperventilate a little bit to try to ventilate more effectively. That causes our kidneys to change our acid-base status as well. The second change, our blood gets thicker because now our body says, okay, I better make more blood cells because there's less oxygen around. So I increase the oxygen carrying capacity. So people who live at altitude, and when I used to live here, I moved away to Boston, my blood counts went down and then they came back up when I moved right back over here. So that's good too. Now other changes can also happen over time. In fact, there's been some link to chronic deprivation of oxygen to the brain leading to cognitive changes and maybe even a slightly higher risk of suicidality for people that live chronically at altitude. So a lot of things we're learning about how our body responds, but it wasn't designed to live like this.
So how about like your next visit to the doctor's office? The next time you go check in with your doctor, are you going to see some maybe changes to your chart based on the fact that you live here?
Yeah, so I see as a cardiologist more diseases. Certain diseases are more common. So something called pulmonary hypertension, which is when our lungs see less oxygen, they increase the blood pressure in the lungs in order to compensate. So we see more of that happening. I talked about the thicker blood, so we actually see higher risk of blood clots here in the Mile High City, especially in people who might get dehydrated or people who are in estrogen therapy or people who have cancer, all conditions that can also increase the thickness of the blood. So the two put together can increase your risk of blood clots. And then sleep apnea or sleep disordered breathing. So because of the changes in our breathing patterns, when we're sleeping at night, we're more likely to drop our oxygen and we're more likely to have something called central sleep apnea where our brain sort of forgets to breathe because we're hyperventilating at baseline. So lots of very interesting physiological changes.
Should we move? Should we move from there? That's not the next question.
No, because there's some benefits.
Let's get that. That is the next question. There usually is some benefits when you're talking about positives and negatives. So what are the benefits in this situation?
Yeah, so this is a really fascinating study. So we've seen for a long time that people who live at altitude have lower diabetes and lower metabolic syndrome. Now, we used to think it's probably because of our lifestyles as Coloradans, right? We're more outdoorsy, we're healthier. But now there's a new mouse model study where we expose mice to high altitude. We see, of course, their red blood cells, the number of red blood cells go up, but their red blood cells also start picking up more sugar from the bloodstream. So think about this as a sugar sink. Our red blood cells, we have more of them, and they pick up sugar more effectively because they're exposed to this low oxygen conditions. And they replicated this in mice. So they think that may be one of the reasons that we metabolize our sugar better. And in fact, the mitochondria, which are the little workhorse units of our cells, also work more efficiently because we live at higher altitude.
What about people that live like up in the high country full time?
So even more. So it seems to be very dose dependent. So it starts to see some of these changes at 5,000, and we're of course at 5,280. And then if you go to 10,000, you see more dramatic changes. Now, you can get chronic dehydration and things like that as well, especially as you get older. So I always tell my older patients when they move up to the high country, they have to be a little more careful, get blood tests more often and such. But some of these changes, like I said, make our cells more efficient because they get used to working with less oxygen.
Talk about why high blood sugar is, so dangerous.
You know, Corey, it poisons everything. So every single organ in our body sees blood vessels, and blood sugar poisons the blood vessels. It causes inflammation, it causes blood clots, it causes cholesterol plaque and deposits to happen. And Alzheimer's is actually being called type 3 diabetes now because it's thought to be a disorder of glucose metabolism in our brain. So having high blood sugar, pre-diabetes, which millions of Americans have, and then of course diabetes, are two of the highest risk factor things we can do to increase our risk of stroke and heart disease. So to me, this is really compelling evidence that we can, just living at altitude, can make our sugar metabolism a little bit better. Now they're looking at therapies for diabetics that basically give you a pill that could replicate the effects of altitude. So that's where this is going now. Could this replace a diabetic therapy where you take a pill and your blood cells think they're at high altitude even when they aren't?